The Immortal Game by Aesthetic B. Chapter 23. The Immortal's Endgame. Twilight caught Fluttershy's odds and nodded. Equinox fused into a single blade before her. She raised it high to grab the attention of the remaining troops. "One final time!" she cried, bringing out the point at the approaching army. She raised her head to give Titans and monsters an imperious stare. "For the end of war!" Then the creatures of the Everfree, crazed and fighting for their lives, were upon them. Twilight didn't need to do any math. She knew they could win. Fluttershy made a sound, a single, eerie wail that stopped almost as soon as it started. A wave seemed to ripple outward from her, and her song reached the ears of the army. They seemed to shed some of their exhaustion, standing straighter and focusing on the enemy. Twilight heard it too. This one was laced with rising rainbow dash to a backflip right through a cloud bank. Were these Fluttershy's memories, or just the feelings associating with them? Her first foe was a giant scorpion, as he met it with rainbow dash at her side. Last out was Singer. The venomous point crashed against the ground as Twilight rolled past. She slashed at the creature's legs with Equinox. The four of them fell twisting to the earth. The scorpion recoiled, but Dash already sprung into the air, wings open, spinning like a dancer as she soared past the creature. With a whistle of air, her blade sheared its tail free. Dash landed and stood side by side, moving forward into the enemy swarm. A crunching sound reached her ears as Applejack shattered chitlin and bruised the scorpion's brain. The next several seconds were a blur to Twilight. She remembered monsters coming at her, and Dash from all sides, and she remembered that all of them met magic or steel. They moved together, impossibly fast, ducking under one another's blades even as they sheared the enemies to ribbons. Twilight's blades scattered and reformed. Dash called up thunder and lightning, and they cut a swath through the enemy's ranks. With a flash of purple light, Twilight teleported away from Rainbow Dash into Rarity's side. She appeared in the midst of a teeming pack of spires and manticores. Hoof outstretched, and striking stingers shattered against the end of her foreleg, instead of impaling Rarity through the chest. Another healing note from Fluttershy. Twilight felt Rarity telling her to speak up. The confidence came from knowing Rarity would listen. Yes, these were definitely Fluttershy's experiences. The manticore roared in pain as it withdrew its severed tail. Twilight wasted no time. She threw itself from back, and purple sped through the air beneath her. 14 gleaming fragments meant to sank into undefended flesh. As she turned over in the air above Rarity, Twilight looked up to face the spires on the opposite side. She split Equinox in midair, and sent blade rays away. Her host touched the gravel-crusted ground, just as a dozen of thrashing, shrieking spires met their ears. She ducked, and Forple sped over her. Rarity rolled, and Equinox blazed past her. Their blades formed, glittering diamond and burning magic. They brought the enemy in close. The blade casting was identical. Twilight preferred Rarity's style to Astora's or Terra's. Eventually, Twilight realized that she was using too much unicorn magic. She had been fighting almost constantly since the moment they met the enemy in Everfree. Unless she wanted to have a magic drag, she needed to take a break. She tried to conserve almost all of blade casting and teleportation, two extremely lightweight means, but she was stretching herself too far. It was time to take a break. Rainbow Dash split to the ground beside Rarity, just as Twilight sprang away, ready and able to cover the fragile unicorn while she worked. Twilight dismissed Equinox as she rolled under a spire, and crushed his underbelly with her hind legs. Another note from Fluttershy. It hardly sounded like her voice anymore. Twilight felt the thrill of watching Applejack tie a hog while cheering her on. The assurance that Applejack would always be patient with her. Applejack kicked the dying spire off of Twilight and pulled her to her hooves, her face a mask of grim determination. Twilight nodded to her. They turned back to Titan's army, deliberately facing the thickest portion of cheering, savage monstrosities. Then they charged. Applejack went first, thundering forward on hooves of steel. Her momentum tossed monsters 3 times her size away. She crushed them beneath her legs. Twilight followed, knowing with dismay she was really too light to hurt anything without slowing down. The journey was at the point. Applejack skidded to the halt in the middle of Titan's army, her hooves grinding against dirt and gravel. The point was to put themselves right into the belly of the beast, to bring themselves to where the enemy was thickest, far away from their own troops, and "Rarity!" Twilight said as she slowed to stop beside Applejack. Applejack gave a sort of cough as he looked at the ground. Twilight glanced at the monsters closing in around them. Whatever. She had to find out why Applejack was avoiding Rarity some other time. For now, business beckoned. A pack of timber wolves were their first victims. Now Alpha launched herself on Twilight, jaws gaping. Twilight caught the bite with a foreleg. It clamped down, harder and harder, until Twilight felt thief splintering against her skin. She tossed it to the dirt between them, and Applejack turned it to kindling with a well-placed stomp. There was nothing particularly artsy or sophisticated about the way they went about breaking into enemy lines. They crushed, they bruised, they smashed in heads. While Twilight certainly incorporated the lessons she could draw from Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash, they were more to accentuate Applejack's style of brute force combat. They were savage animals fighting savage monsters. Twilight felt a tick at the back of her consciousness. 100 meters away, Pinkie Pie tightened the bandage around her injured foreleg as he stared down at the biggest scorpion any of them had ever seen. It was a massive specimen, with pincers as big as an adult pony, and a stinger that could have easily impaled one of his smaller brethren. Beady, insectile eyes caught sight of Pinkie Pie. A snap of a pincer could be heard over the cacophony of war. Pinkie Pie loaded another blade to the launcher on her good foreleg and charged at it, her host dancing over the packed girth. She came at the scorpion, running full tilt towards its pincers with her woefully tiny blade. Pinkie jumped. Another incantation of Fluttershy's siren song. Twilight felt the thrill of being with Pinkie Pie in the bakery. Uncertain just what crazy idea Pinkie Pie would come up with next, but certain that whatever it was would be tons of fun. It was though they had rehearsed it. Twilight popped out of the air beneath her, grabbed her, and tossed her to the air with a graceful arc. As he flew, the launcher attached to Pinkie Pie's wounded foreleg was pulled away by Twilight's magic. Pinkie Pie turned in the air above the massive scorpion, soaring over and landed a roll, and she sounded around the arachnid as she came to her hooves, lifting her launcher at its back, letting loose with one of its blades. It barely penetrated the creature's significant carapace. The scorpion didn't acknowledge the wound at all. With a tug of magnets and pull of straps, the second launcher wrapped itself around Twilight's foreleg. She dipped into her unicorn magic, lightly touching the enhancements around the device. They were her spells. It was easy to feed them more magic. She tugged at the blade, lodged in the scorpion's armor. It made no sound as it passed through the giant insect, cutting a hole through its insides and whirring through the air to attach itself to Twilight's foreleg, trailing Icar. The creature collapsed, but Twilight had already teleported behind it into Pinkie Pie's side. Pinkie lowered another blade onto her arm. It created the horde of monsters that surrounded them. "I kung fu," she said. "It's stronger." Twilight rolled her eyes, even though Pinkie Pie was telling the truth. Fighting with Pinkie Pie was a different experience. They moved together, so closely synchronized, they might as well have been one being. Though, with their harmonic connection, they were the closest they could get. Pinkie Pie's style of fighting was unorthodox. Rarely did they use the same set of limbs to keep themselves on the ground for more than a second at a time. Sometimes they were even on the ground at all. Twilight flailed Pinkie Pie around like a cub. They traded blades at least a dozen times. They danced on the back of spires, scooched under manticores, and bounced over timber walls as they maneuvered around the battlefield. For a moment, Twilight almost forgot the nature of what they were doing and started to have fun. She was drawn back to the present by the absence of enemies, a lack of things to kill. Twilight threw out her magical senses, searching for the next wave now that Pinkie was safe. She found none. They won. A final note. Twilight was watching Twilight. Watching Twilight lose control because her letter to Celestia was going to be late. Seeing her mane disheveled, her eyes wild, hearing the crack of her voice. Then she saw Twilight giving orders, presenting awards, slicing entire found spheres in the face of a dragon, organizing the first ever punctual winter wrap-up. She saw Twilight's confidence, her strength and determination, and she felt it too. "You think you're not worthy enough for them," Fluttershy said, landing beside Twilight with hardly a sound. She was facing back, away from Twilight. Twilight turned back to look at the army. Her army. They made it through, but they were at their limit. Ponies crawled out from under the corpses of creatures 5 times their size, blood and ichor matting their coats. Ponies were spread across the ground in bits and pieces, ruined heaps of flesh that couldn't possibly have once fit together to make a living thing. Twilight brought them the worst of nightmares. The living looked around in carnage of empty stares, or faces twisted into expressions of horror. They gathered around the dying, those wounded beyond the point of recovery, and said whatever words they could. Twilight tried to get an idea of how many they lost. There was no way to count how many ponies were missing by this point, but it was at least 30%. Twilight reset. 30%. Armies were supposed to break by 20. Was it desperation that kept them fighting? Or her? "They love you," Fluttershy said. "I love you.
All of us love you. You have to understand, Twilight.
There was a sound like a crack of whip, magnified 10,000-fold. A striking whistle followed it, growing closer and closer every second. Twilight frowned, glancing at Zoss. The dragon stood before the citadel, not a creature near him. Impassive. He wasn't making whatever that noise was. She looked up, searching outward with her magical senses. What? She felt it almost instantly. Mere seconds after the noise started. It was just so fast. Her eyes barely had time to widen. The projectile struck the ground a long way near them, near the edge of the army, and the ground erupted into a mat explosive of dirt, gravel, and stone. The dirt beneath Twilight seized in proximity to the blast. Hundreds of ponies lost their balance and fell as a tremendous shock wave barreled through their broken plane. How many dozens of her ponies just died in the space of a heartbeat? A cracker like a whip, a keening whistle, growing deeper as it came closer to them.
No.
Twilight whispered. Access came before thought. Twilight pushed forward outward of her magical senses, farther than she ever had before, and found the approaching war spell. It was simple in design, but not easy. A lattice of spells constructed to penetrate any defense and deliver an inordinate amount of force. She tried to work the magic, unwind it, and ruin the spell, tying Defiant's defenses in a line. As she just started the only breakable point, it constructed a spell to shatter each defense simultaneously. Explosion rocked the earth beneath her once again. As Titan's second spell struck the midst of the army. Twilight heard screams of renewal from the blast rain down any survivors close enough. No! She sobbed. A crack like a whip, a whistling shriek. There was a very easy way to stop Titan's war spell, Twilight realized. It was just an explosive projectile after all. Any spell that had to go somewhere could be destructed by putting something in the way. That was the entire premise of moment fields and force fields. For Titan's spell, she just needed something strong, sturdy, and mobile. Herself, of course. Twilight threw herself through space and held in the air above the battlefield. For a moment, she hovered there, staring up at the starry sky and looming edge of the making spell, as it was propelled towards Canterlot. Above her, a faint white speck moving incredibly fast was Titan's spell. She hardened her skin with earth pony magic, and threw out the toughest moment of spells she commands. It cuddled into a ball and intercepted a spell meant to kill dozens. A barrier helped, creating enough resistance to cause Titan's spell to explode. Twilight thought she remembered what happened after that, but she didn't. No sudden wave of force, no loud noise. She didn't even remember flying through the air. One moment she was looking up at Titan's spell, the next she was raining bones in the dirt. A Titan's magic wasn't just sophisticated, it was powerful. It had a kind of brute force Twilight both longed for and despised. The power of an alicorn over 3,000 years old. Defense was untenable. Had she forgotten that, reveling in her own strength, or did she just not care? For the first time that night, Twilight almost died. A crack like a whip, a whistling shriek. Twilight! An object shot from somewhere far off. Twilight couldn't help but feel a little revived at the chance to show them what she was trying. For too long she pretended to be their new god, issuing orders and spending lives without giving them anything in return. Here at least she could prove that she was willing to die for them, that to her they weren't worth anything less. She could never earn the devotion they gave her. She could never repay the lives of the fallen. But this was as close as she'd get. If she was unworthy, at least she wasn't a pretender. Once more she was in the air, experiencing that blissful moment of calm before total annihilation. The citadel was in her vision this time, hanging at the edge of peripheral and glowing with Titan's power. It was beautiful, Twilight decided, even if it was going to be the doom of their race. Beautiful and terrible, just like the gods that built it. Titan's war spell did not hit her directly, but broke open and detonated against her shield. It had been designed to burrow through defenses before breaking. Twilight's moment field might as well have been 3 meters of rock soil on the ground below. It was interesting to note that the spell wasn't meant to kill large groups, it was to do battle with an invisible. Well, that's probably why it packaged in so many defenses. It was a spell graph to tag just for Twilight Sparkle. Twilight was fine with that. She had a spell just for him, too. Again she felt nothing as the incandescent white missile burst through her body. Did her heart stop? Did she lose consciousness? How far was Twilight able to slip into death before her earth pony magic couldn't bring her back out again? She was straddling the line. She had no idea if she had enough power to survive another blast. Twilight assumed as she fell limply out of the sky, a glowing purple streak of light. What would the army think, seeing her fall like that? Would they think that she was being a fool or a hero? Could he understand that there was no way she could not do this? Afraid Das must have caught her at one point, because when Twilight came to, she was putting herself together in Das's hooves as they glided to the ground. Twilight! Ras shouted. If you do that again, you're going to kill yourself! Delighted amongst their friends. Twilight struggled to her hose and popped her shoulder back into place. And if I don't, dozens of ours will die. Again.
Then don't,
Fluttershy said. Every pony turned to her, as she said in a voice no less firm.
please.
Twilight cast out her magical senses, detecting the next magic missile, and distracting herself from the idea that Fluttershy would advocate the death of dozens if it meant saving Twilight's life. Twilight, Applejack said, you don't understand. The effect you can't have. Twilight's voice became flat and dull. The argument is academic. She closed her eyes to face the citadel and the solstice. He's here. Has he forgotten that Celestia and Luna were fighting the king? Even if they succeeded at the citadel, Ponykind's fate would still be decided by their victory. And here was Titan, with Celestia and Luna nowhere to be seen. For the barest instant, Twilight gritted her teeth with rage. Was this it, then? Had Luna assured Twilight they still had hope and then flown off to die? Was she angry at Luna, or her own helplessness? Twilight always somehow worked under the assumption that if they lost, it would be her fault. If they won, it would be her victory. She frowned. For some pony who had despised the idea of being a god, she was certainly developing a sense of arrogance. Titan! She shouted, looking up. She meant to come out as a warning to the army. Instead, it sounded like a challenge. Titan struck the ground between Twilight and Solstice. His toe splitting stone as large as a wagon. He was wearing his armor, and at night his mane and eyes shone like beacons. He raised his head. Everything miles fell silent. Twilight Sparkle. Twilight felt the eyes of hundreds of ponies on her back. What did he expect? Does he fight the king to the death and save them all? She could barely do anything here. Barely. Keep him talking. Luna? Twilight asked him, trying desperately to keep her voice steady. Celestia? It cracked. A desperation, fear, hope, all of them leaked into that one word. It's like Twilight was back at Ponyfield, sending friendship reports. Celestia was still, well, Celestia. She couldn't die, and if she did, what then? Twilight Sparkle would have no teacher anymore. She'd be lost. Titan gazed at her from across what seemed like a small distance. Twilight once again felt that crawling feeling of insignificance. He tilted his head an imperceptible distance to one side, as he realized her mistake. Immortal does not ask God questions, Twilight Sparkle. Singularity darkened the air around him as he swept in an arc. He did it with the speed of a 3,000-year alicorn. There was nothing Twilight could do to stop him. The spell came in a wave of oily darkness. Twilight saw it approaching, faster than any wave of water could. Frantically tried to analyze it with her magical senses. She might as well try to read a book in the seconds it took her to reach them. A wall of choking black that threatened to suffocate her, and dozens of ponies around her. She looked at every spell she knew, desperate for a way to stop whatever it was Titan had thrown at them. If she shielded for everything, then whatever spell that actually did would fail. Her magic took the same form it always did. A thin barrier of purple light, arcing outwards to span the width of the wave. Her horn burned with the power she was funneling into the spell. The wave overtook her as though it were nothing there at all. Washing up and over the wall she created to continue its interval advance. Twilight hardly thought at all. She grabbed each of her friends with her mind and teleported to the other side of the wave, leaving dozens of ponies behind to defend for themselves. She felt numb as her host touched the ground. So much for earning their devotion, when she had gladly let them dive to save her own. Her friends. They stood around her. Twilight lent her attention to them as she began to tap the elements of harmony, drawing in their incredible source of power as a last-ditch effort. She focused on Titan, still far away from them, as each of the links to her friends began to thrum in her mind. No, Titan said as his horn flashed. It's like being backhooked across her face. Her spell just stopped, like someone had pulled a book away from her mid-sentence and tossed it in the fire. Damn you, Twilight whispered. Titan split his blades and threw his fragments out, like he was scratching another item off the do list. Dark Aura sped towards him, possible to see against the night. Twilight called Equinox, and split it into enough parts to intercept Titan's blade motes. She threw them out, charging each one with as much power as she possibly could. Her head ached. Her thoughts blurred into one another, but she pressed on. She couldn't afford to run out of power. Not now. And their blades met. Twilight went out like a candle flame in a hurricane. Half a dozen orbs of darkness came at her. They were intercepted by 14 glittering diamonds. It fell from the air as Titan's blade belts overwhelmed them. There were only 3 singularity shards left now, and each of them changed their course to fall towards Rarity. Twilight reached out to teleport her out of the way, and nothing happened. Her magic failed, expended until she could gather enough strength to again. Rarity was alone. Rarity began to call forth Black to herself, but was far too slow compared to the king's weapon. Applejack attempted to catch her, throwing herself so that way might be in the way of Titan's blade. Like a tempest twist of his mouth, Titan's horn glowed, and the 3 points of darkness accelerated to sink into Rarity's chest before Applejack put her to the ground. The hard connection that Twilight felt with Rarity didn't go out. It meant Rarity was still alive, even though she stopped moving. The spells on her robe must have stopped most of the harm. It had to be true. If Rarity couldn't die, Twilight would be lost. She barely noted Titan drawing his blade out of the air behind him, throwing it forward another shatter. What she did notice was the exhaustless wing coming down to envelop the king and obscuring him from sight. Exhaustus breathed out with the roar of an erupting volcano, and the inky black flames poured forth to fill the space between his wing and maw. They doubled and redoubled, heating the enclosed space past the point of the boil iron. Exhaustus kept going, heating stones a decent meters away to flames to incandescence. Twilight would have burned, were it not for protective enchantments. A tremendous crack rang out over Everfree as a skull thick as a tree trunk shattered to thousands of fragments. Gore and shards of bone exploded from a hole in Exhaustus' head. The flames coming from his mouth ceased. He collapsed, the light in his eyes dying like fading embers. A slit was cut in the dragon's wing as it folded inward, and Titan stepped out into the night air once again. Or at least, what was left of him did. Backlit by the light of the citadel, Titan was bone wrapped in glistening sinew, slender for a pony so tall. His wings spanned out behind him, a set of thin white fingers clawing at the air around him. Twilight could see his tongue grow into his mouth, tendons and muscles expanding, all of fleshless, bloodless. She wasn't surprised. He had no eyes, but they were still burned. 2 pinpoints of light in the eye sockets of a skeleton king. No! Applejack was wondering, her hooves holding the other side of Rarity's head. No! 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 Twilight looked down at Rarity and felt magic come to her in surges of vengeful hatred.
Kill him,
she said, letting her voice reverberate over the battlefield. An army obeyed her. Metal shards and massive missiles were thrown at the king by the dozens. Thin streaks of lightning danced towards him through the air above. Soon, Titan was in the midst of a hailstorm of taunting blows. The skeleton pony weathered them with disinterest, looking at the steel bounce harmlessly off his pale flesh. Mouth opened, and a great tongue formed the words without using lips. Die now, Twilight whispered.
No.
The stream of iron crossed the distance between them near instantaneously, a searing beam of white-hot molten metal. It took Titan in the chest, carving a hole through his ribcage and sinking into the wall and citadel between him. Twilight's war spell had so much kinetic guarantee. Titan's body never got into absorb most of the blow. He stood still as it cut through him, a wraith-like monster impaled on a spear of light. Titan tilted his head to the side. She cleaved him in two with a simple readjustment of her spell's angle, and his legs fell along with a sizable portion of his lower abdomen. His upper body stood in the air, held aloft by what Twilight presumed was Titan's magic. He burst into flames as his legs picked himself off the ground. Twilight's mouth fell open, and an Immortal opponent would down right into the heat, let alone the massive amount of kinetic guarantee. And Titan still stood. She ran out of iron. Titan's body pulled itself together almost immediately. Still only a skeleton covered in glistening white musculature. She went past him. The glowing slash she had sheared into the citadel. In a ripple of glowing tissue, Titan covered himself in skin and hair. Eyes formed over the glow in its empty sockets. He seemed almost as an afterthought. He even realized he had wearing any skin. No freedom, Titan said, mind-shattering voice drifting out over the broken plain. No will, no love, no morality. He cast singularity once more, leveling at Twilight. No hope. Luna hit the ground first, surrounded in darkness and diving through the sky. The deer, still a streak of light at her side. She didn't slow down, and struck a pose like her father had, or stopped to talk. She rolled right into the contact stance, and starting to her father. Titan acted appropriately. Taking a step forward, maneuvering singularity with his direct style, struck the deer once. Luna's blade flickered on the superior power of her father's weapon. He began to advance, and singularity took a large gash out of Luna's chest. Twilight started preparing another round of iron. "Luna!" she shouted. The princess barely acknowledged her with a slight glance over his shoulder. To return her focus to the king. "Remember what you told me!" Luna ducked and wove around Titan's blade, and somehow managed to sneak in a snap. She dodged another fury of blows, moving so quickly it almost seemed that she was present with them. Titan brought his hind legs up in a kick, and Luna rolled under him and brought the deer down on his head. He had to back away. It was far easier to see Celestia's approach than it had been Luna's. She was like a newborn star, pure white alicorn, covered in gleaming armor, trailing a blade of fire. As he hit the ground like a meteor, Titan split singularity into two parts. The king stopped as he held Celestia and Luna's blade at bay with his own, and looked over at Twilight. Twilight could almost see the thought process flash through his eyes, feel his magical senses reach out and touch her god-slaying spell as it neared completion. Fighting all three of them would be dangerous. He took off, throwing out a ripple of compressed air as he moved straight towards the sky. Luna followed immediately. Celestia turned to Twilight, swallowed and nodded just once, and followed. In a matter of seconds he'd come and gone. Her situation came back to her with freezing clarity. Titan's imminent spell. The citadel. Rarity. Applejack was laying beside Rarity in the dirt, tears streaming down her face. "Sleep won't wake up," Applejack said as Twilight lay down at her side. "Sleep just—" Twilight fell down to the ground beside her and reached out with her magical senses. "Titan's magic," she said softly. "It's inside her." She tore off the front part of Rarity's robe to examine her wounds. Applejack let out a piteous groan. 3 blackened and puckered holes marred Rarity's normally pristine coat. The hair around them had melted away. The flesh became muddy and depressed, but it didn't look like it had been punctured. Applejack's voice trembled. "Can you help her?" Twilight slowly ran a hoof across the marks on Rarity's flesh. She watched it rise and fall rapidly with her breathing. "No," she whispered. "I don't know anything about medicine, magical or mundane. I can kill a pony in the space of a heartbeat 100 different ways, and I don't know how to heal." Firefly stared down at Rarity, lip trembling.
But we need her for the elements.
"She's still alive," Twilight said. She turned to Applejack. "Carry her. We're going into the citadel. Everyone stand back while I open it." Twilight took several steps forward and faced the massive edifice to the closest arm. Healed the damage she dealt to it like she was examining Rarity. Strange metal shedding iron and sealing itself into an unmarked hole. "Can you open it?" Rainbow Dash asked from behind Twilight. "Like with a spell?" Twilight released her war spell. There was a screaming war of superheated air as the thin legs of boiling iron cut a secret opening from the citadel. Fell away, revealing only darkness within. "Yeah," Twilight said, "like with a spell. Now come on, before it repairs itself." Twilight led the way, over stone and dirt that turned to cooling slag and glass. She led her shell-shocked companions. That Rarity was unconscious and dying meant nothing in the face of ponykind annihilation, or so she told herself. Maybe they fixed everything, and inside the citadel there'd be some magic that could heal her. They would bring back everyone else, too. Every faceless pony she asked to die screaming, so that ponykind would have a chance. And while it was at it, it could make her love Celestia again.
Twilight?
Fluttershy asked. Twilight realized she stopped moving and falling into the flat of her forelegs. "I'm okay," she said quickly. "We have to keep going."
Twilight?
"We can do this," Twilight said firmly. "There is still hope. I just have to remember what Luna told me." Fluttershy helped Twilight to her hooves.
What Luna told you?
Twilight nodded. "Last night, she—"
Luna wasn't with you last night. She was with me.
Twilight frowned. "She came by the library after the sun had gone down, Fluttershy.
She slept in my living room, Twilight. We talked about Exhaustus all night."
Twilight shook her head. "No, she—" Suddenly, Twilight was back in the library. "Your mind is not unlike Celestia's. She's been having similar troubles." Twilight saw. "Are you here because of her?" "No, Twilight Sparkle. I'm here for you," Luna said. Twilight remembered seeing Luna step into the candlelight, thinking the princess looked almost unreal and indistinct. She thought back to when she looked into Luna's eyes. Such as she'd never really done before, and felt its fading teens of familiarity. Twilight was back in the secret corner, arguing with Celestia about the speech he had given the army. "That's dishonest," she said. "It is.
But we won't tell them anything that isn't true by itself. We'll just make sure to hear for some point to listen to. Celestia, Twilight whispered. It was Celestia.
Her head snapped up to Fluttershy, then towards the citadel to the sky beyond. We have to go! Twilight led them along the last stretch of the ground before the citadel and stopped just before the gaping hole left by her war spell. The metal had cooled, and was already beginning to restructure herself, crystalline glasses glowing, enjoying it as edges. Twilight stepped over the threshold and into the citadel. It was like entering another world. The citadel was made of an alloy Twilight didn't understand. But whatever it was silver white and incredibly dense. Grooves were carved along the inside walls, and just like the outside, were filled with the light of Titan's magic. The center was dominated by a column of white light, which was orbited by tens of thousands of glowing shards. As she entered, she felt the oppressive wall of anti-teleportation magic engulf her, along with something else entirely. It was a field of unicorn magic, certainly, but it wasn't aimed at other unicorn magic. It was the reason why Twilight had never seen any pony other than Titan fly in the Citadel. It was an anti-flight field. Even developing that kind of spell was against the rules of unicorn magic. Twilight's friends filed in behind her. Right, Twilight said. The only way I can stop Titan's spell is if I seize control of the Citadel. You can do that? Dast asked. Hopefully, Twilight said. It'll be a lot easier without him here. We can't fly, so we're going to have to ascend. She looked up, past dozens of rings of stars to the distant upper levels of the Citadel. Might as well start now. Twilight closed her eyes and reached out to the Citadel. What she touched was not at all what she had been expecting. Titan's magic had always been direct, but powerful, efficient, and to the point. Titan thought in straight lines. Evidently, Harmony did not. The defenses surrounding the Citadel were the most convoluted series of spells Twilight had ever seen. It was chaos, barely conceivable madness. With Twilight, the answer was obvious, but not reachable. Simple, but not easy. Harmony's defenses were less about power and more about understanding. They were anything but flawless, and even looking at them gave Twilight a headache. It was a maze. Twilight couldn't smile in lighter circumstances. She was quite good at mazes. She had been trained by Celestia herself, the princess who ruled the world. Celestia, who manipulated her yet again by disguising herself as Princess Luna. What goal had been she trying to accomplish by coming to the library and spoken to Twilight of magic and hope? Twilight felt her ears burned with rage and thought of being caught in another of her old teacher's lies and half-truths. Why couldn't Celestia just leave her be? Purple showers are ours, Twilight said as he wrested control of the first dozen shards and had them assemble into a set of steps. White stars are Titans. Follow me. She began to run up the illuminated stairway. She didn't look back, because she couldn't bear to see the looks on their faces. Rarity would still be slung over Applejack's back, dying. How could Twilight ever justify expending the lives of her friends? We can't ever hope to deserve the help and trust that you give us, Celestia said, but we can try. Try how? Nothing she would ever repay Rarity's generosity. Twilight was brought out of her reverie by 100 shards of metal slamming at her from the side. She pushed off her glowing purple steps into the yawning abyss beyond. Immediately, she threw a dozen platforms beneath her to catch her fall and roll to her hooves. She jumped onto the lower section of the stairs. Twilight landed, stunned to see 1,000 metal fragments converge on the place where they had just stood. None of them were bigger than one of her hooves, and all of them made out of the same strange metal of the Citadel. They glowed with the light of Titan's magic. Twilight watched, bunched together to form one cohesive swarm of spinning blades. What is that? Shagged. No more fighting. They were so close. Terra has puppets, Twilight said. Guessing Titan has that. How do we fight it? Fluttershy asked in an even tone. Twilight closed her eyes. That thing wasn't killable. It was Titan's guardian. A machine creature for a machine pony, with a machine heart and machine mind. We keep moving. We survive. And when I control the Citadel, I'll control it too. Twilight split her mind two ways. She needed one mind to fight with her friends and keep them safe. First mind could do that. It was already charging the steps. But she would have to seize control of the Citadel, unraveling the complex triangle of magic that was Harmony's deterrent. Every time she pulled the tangle apart, more of the flowing shards became hers. She used them. They provided steps to stand on as they ascended the Citadel. They formed together to create a sealed wall to protect Titan's lunging blade storm. They were springboards for Pinky to jump off of. They needed all the things. Twilight's first mind pissed a battle against the Blade Storm with the help of her friends. Attacking the thing was useless. Any shards of metal she could knock out of the air would quickly reincorporate themselves into the swarm. Instead, she fought a battle of barriers and avoidance, draining her magical reserves dry in an effort to keep them safe. Slowly, they advanced. It wasn't fast enough, though. As he worked within the citadel, Twilight began to get a sense of Titan's spell. It was almost done. The entire race of ponies would cease to be in mere minutes. The light of the beam at Citadel's heart began to intensify, casting them into a world made entirely of stark shadows. You make what others want to be better. Be more than what they once were. What has Celestia meant by that? Twilight Sparkle had become a symbol to ponykind. A god. By definition, she wasn't just a pony. She was more. But the real Twilight was just a pony. Celestia had to know that, because Celestia had seen her despairing not moments before. Had he taken advantage of Twilight's emotional state? No. Nothing Celestia had said had anything to do with the relationship. In fact, when asked about Celestia, Luna had defended the question and brought up Twilight instead. Slowly, in the heat of pitched combat, Twilight realized that Celestia hadn't had any ulterior motives. She just come to make sure Twilight was okay. Plural became minutes singular. Twilight had perhaps a third of the citadel in her grasp. She needed to pick up the pace. They could beat the Blade Storm. Twilight's first mind observed. If they were careful, there was only a nuisance until they took the citadel. Flood relief shot through her, even as the first mind tossed them in front of several blades meant for Rainbow Dash. At least something was going right. Twilight couldn't take her mind off Celestia, as he worked frankly to seize control of her. It nagged at her, as though it was confused something important. What was he missing? Celestia had spent their last night alive, making certain that the mare who despised her still had hope. Celestia, who no doubt had been thinking the same thoughts Twilight had. No one had been there to set the princess's mind at ease that night. She loved Twilight, and to speak to her again, she had to use a spell to disguise herself. Celestia had fallen from the sky to save Twilight from Terra, gladly offering up her own life in exchange. But Celestia had also thrown Twilight into a war. Twilight understood exactly why Celestia had done it. She couldn't forgive her for it. Why not? The answer was simple. She wanted Celestia to be a god, infallible, perfect, accountable. Celestia wasn't Twilight's god. She couldn't be Twilight's god anymore. But the things she'd done should have made her a friend. Twilight might never see her again. Twilight's first mind placed the hoof down, expecting to land on another step. It didn't. They reached the upper ring of the citadel, faster than Twilight would have thought possible. The platforms must have reached, also lifting them more than she realized. First mind dove under a swarm of hundreds of razor-sharp blades, and he bit into her darkened skin as Twilight came up into a roll. The shaft of light at the center of the citadel was almost blinding by now. Such was its intensity, casting in a world without color. Twilight's black blood fell into the silver platforms below. Friends fought silhouettes against beings of light, doing everything they could to deter Titan's inexorable minion. A minute became seconds. Twilight wasn't half finished. They weren't going to make it in time. Titan's spell was about to travel up and out of the citadel, where it would expand to engulf all of ponykind. Twilight needed to focus. She needed to put everything she had into untangling Harmony's giant knot, but the Blade Storm demanded her attention. 14 diamonds, brilliant in the light of Titan's spell, sped past Twilight and knocked as many shards of metal out of the air. The Blade Storm fragments fell away, sheared in two, and Vorpal turned back to its work, its diamonds flinging themselves onto their own courses to intercept every sharp shard that went for his friends. Twilight turned to see Rarity, standing atop a floating purple platform, a look of intense concentration on her face. She was dying. There could be no doubt about that. Flesh along her face and sides had turned black and dead. Twilight's magical senses revealed the extent of Titan's strike. The magic was eating her heart. "Do it!" Rarity said as she watched Twilight watched her. "Do it!" She gritted her teeth as Vorpal held a storm of steel at bay in the midst of blue sparks. "I can give you this!" Twilight nodded. It was all she could do. The two minds set themselves against Harmony's defenses, claiming the citadel as their own far faster than she had before. She pulled apart threads of its defenses, slowly revealing Titan's spell. It was his heartbeats away from release. She had over half the citadel under control. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She wasn't going to make it. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair that he could come this far and fail, when all Titan Kid did was callously play his hand. It wasn't fair that with a careless sweep of his mind, he could kill one of Twilight's best friends. It wasn't fair that despite her supposed godhood, she couldn't protect any of them. Twilight looked at her friends one last time. Every incident was illuminated by Titan's spell. Now cast into a harsh white light, that made each and every detail easy to make out. The angry focused on Rarity's face, even as tendrils of darkness moved to claim that too. Twilight wondered if Rarity had realized her heart had stopped beating seconds ago. Applejack had her body covering Pinkie Pie. Tears were streaming down her face. For Rarity, no doubt. The reality of their situation would have dawned on Applejack first. All of them. Her pragmatism was her curse. Death was in the air, despite not being to fold her wings. She just jumped ahead. Her teeth were gritted, her eyes set and determined. Twilight had little doubt that even fighting a storm of blades, Dash would either fight until she won, or simply fight forever. Firesight had a gash on one cheek, and the blood running from the wound joined the dry trails leading down from a crown of thorns. She looked unreal, like a wrathful deity, a newborn god. Pinkie Pie saw Twilight Sparkle and smiled. The effect you can have. Maybe Twilight didn't think she was the best pony they made out to be. Celestia, her friends, ponykind. But if they could put their trust in her, Dizzy would put her trust in them. They believed she was their savior. Dizzy could. She would be that savior. She were the mental command for them, for as long as she had to. Because now she had a chance to earn it. The spell was about to be released, up and away, to eradicate everything inside every pony, everywhere that made them special, unless something made it miss. It would have to be something incredibly strong and powerful. There was only one thing that could do that. A pony so mighty she was practically a god. A pony who didn't need to do this to prove she was worth Ponykind's devotion, because he already believed that to be true, and he made it true. Pinkie's smile faded, her eyes widened. It had taken her to the very end, but Twilight was happy again. With who she was, with what she was, and with the ponies around her. The thought left her mind as she found Pinkie's. I love you. All of you. And I love Celestia too. Make sure to tell her. And with that, Twilight closed her eyes and turned to face the doom of her species, and jumped. And that's the end of the fic. Bye, guys! You're still here. I know. I just want to see if I can really drive him insane. Have I ever asked you? I've always been afraid of my answer. Did you foresee my betrayal? Did you know I would become Nightmare Moon? Singularity passed so close to Celestia's face, it took a thin layer of hair away as the blade continued along its course. The tiny fibers were immediately swept away by the storm. Microscopic iota caught in the midst of war between gods. Luna's question rested on Celestia's mind as he absorbed the lightning bolt with Zenith, and it struck out at her father. He blocked, of course, but that was to be expected. Celestia's designs were rarely one step, even the spur in a moment of combat. You need to know now? We're supposed to be coordinating! She threw herself backwards into the storm. The king did not pursue her. Instead, he turned on Luna. Rail blew down upon her. Celestia poised herself against a cloud, with her wings spread wide, searching for the perfect opening. Whether we win or lose, I don't want any loose ends. There was only one thing that still troubles me in all the world, Celestia. Did you know I was going to betray you? Left flank up, right hind leg down. Celestia saw her open. She froze. What was he going to tell Luna? Lion would optimize Luna's defensiveness in combat, increase her chances of victory against the king. It would be good for her in the long run, too. They need to be able to work together and rebuild Equestria. A lie, however, was totally out of the question. I saw your resentment. I knew it was only a matter of time. I just didn't expect you to take out the sliver. Celestia threw herself back into the fray, deferring Titan's intentions with a series of sweeps from her blade, while Luna struck them with a brilliant green crack of thunder. He staggered back, and Zenith punched a hole through his back. Then why didn't you stop me? You could have! I know you, Celestia. You don't need magic to make a pony do what you want. Luna's words stung, but they were true. Celestia had 1,000 years of unopposed rule to attest to that. Titan knocked them both away with a blast of pure force. Then charged the Celestia through the turbulent air. She felt rather than heard the sound barrier break as he collided with her. I wanted you to be your own mare. I didn't want to be like him. It broke my heart, Luna, when you became so broken. But that was the path you chose. Titan never got to press his advance. A million trails of shadows converged behind him. And Luna swung Nadir downward as a sheet of darkness slithered up his legs. As paths go, it could not have been the west one. And that is here, after all. Celestia cast a beam of liquid sunfire, and it burned away Titan's wings in seconds. He began to fall, and they dove after him, two trails of light streaking down through the megastorm. What do you mean? Now they fought in freefall, using their Pegasus magic to glide their descent. They twisted and writhed in the air, over and around Titan's blades, as their own weapons slithered between his defenses. That I forgive you, and that I see you now as being so fraught with flaws you cannot help but be beautiful. You grieve over the loss. You worry for Twilight Sparkle. You lie and you're proud. You wonder whether or not what you're doing is right. You're a pony, Celestia, just like me. It's taken me this long to see it. In the spinning, rushing chaos of falling through the storm while engaged in pitched combat, past Zenith, over Singularity and her father, just above Nadir, Celestia found Luna's eyes. They were still cool and focused, but not entirely distant as Celestia remembered them. Luna continued. I used to fight only for you. I couldn't even cast a deer till I knew you were alive. I carried around this tiny figurine of you. I wanted what you do in my hooves. Now the deer comes easier than it ever has. What happened? I met Twilight's friends. Then I met Twilight. She disagreed with almost everything I had to say. She wasn't afraid to stop believing in gods. The gods fell, the blades making flashes of light and thunderclouds of sound as they met one another. Celestia and Luna's wings beating frantically to keep them level with Titan. The ground was coming up fast, but Celestia saw it wasn't the green grass that Pack Darcy expected. They had been fighting over the stretch outside of Everfree for some time now. The storm too high to touch the ground. Below them was the western gate of Canterlot, or what had been the western gate. It was still a ruin from when it had been dropped on Terra, so many nights ago. Still, they reached Canterlot already. Once meant they had been fighting for a very long time. How much fight did Luna and Celestia have left in them? Moreover, however weak was Titan? It was impossible to tell. They could all look perfect until they reached the fairy dregs of their power. Celestia flared her wings to slow her fall, and Luna followed suit. Titan didn't bother. Celeste could easily absorb the shock of hitting the ground at terminal velocity. Hooves shattered the stones beneath them as he landed a crouch on the road leading to Canterlot. In the still air beneath the storm, the sounding meat raised their ears with perfect clarity. Celestia hit the ground to one side of him, Luna the other. They moved in. Right out of court. Left haunch tense. Duck and stab at mid-rib. Luna ducked before Titan's strike ever came, stabbing out to catch him in the chest with a deer. He brought the second half of celerity to divert her blade. Left shoulder loosening, back legs tightening. He's about to throw her away and turn on me. Titan thrust forward, thrust his blades, and Luna sent reeling back. He spun to face Celestia, but see it buried himself in his chest and nearly snapped out of his way with his blade. His arm began to glow. Accessing repertoire spells, something to knock me back. But would Titan settle only for that? No. He only wanted to leave her compromised so he could tear into Luna. Beating them one at a time was his method. Time was not on his side, however. His spell was about to stagger him. Use your advantage! It was a missile. An exploding projectile right to the cushion of force. Celestia twisted out of the way and let it graze her, while a concussive power threw her back and away from the king, tearing skin from her body in places. It also sent Titan reeling into the barest of seconds, allowing Luna to slice off his wings again. He spun to face her, as he vanished in a cloud of darkness that streamed through the air at Celestia's side. Celestia didn't wait for her wounds to heal. Titan had no wings for the next several seconds, which meant no focus for his Pegasus magic. They were going to capitalize on that weakness. At their command, lightning tore through the blackened clouds above and split the sky to meet them. Twin bolts struck Nadir and Zenith, then blazed forward to break the king. They speared him through the chest, cooking flesh and stopping organs, even as Celestia and Luna rushed to meet him. He'd be weak by now. At his worst, burned and mutilated. Titan wouldn't be able to focus on the conflict and healing at the same time, both effectively. They put him at a disadvantage, and then he pressed it. It wasn't what he'd be able to recover from. The first rule of immortality was that you would eventually die. Finally, Titan would face a rule that applied to even him. But something was wrong. They closed the distance to the king, and faced Flash with the barest trace of emotion. It wasn't fear, it was annoyance. Celestia didn't know what that meant. Shoulders set, legs spread. He's preparing to meet both our blades in parallel. Feint and roll past him. They led with their blades in tandem, points first. They ducked at the last moment, rolling under Titan's blocks to flank him again. Singularity met Celestia as soon as he tucked her wings, relinquished any possibility for escape. He dug into her chest, shearing away a large chunk of flesh and both her forelegs with a shock of intense pain. Her roll failed as she tumbled into dirt. Before she realized what was happening, Singularity had pinned her to the ground and through the heart. It was simple, Celestia realized. She had been analyzing Titan's every move, incorporating his reactions to the combat strategy. It was just like she had with Terra. Slowly, she had taken the initiative and started to win. But Titan's style hadn't changed at all. She knew he had to be capable of displaying his mind. Why hadn't he shifted his methods? The answer was obvious. He waited, collecting all the data he needed. Not to improve his effectiveness in battle, no. Titan was just going to kill them. He wasn't making a gamble when he knew he'd win. He was just collecting the chips. This was how Titan won the Immortal game. The world collapsed around her heart as Singularity pulsed. Immense gravity drew her inwards. As he felt her bones and muscles strain under the weight of his blade. It took her power, too, draining her reserves just like it had atop the dark heart of the Everfree Forest. Celestia began to focus her unicorn magic, even as it fell to her hooves. She couldn't let it end like this. She turned her head to see Luna screaming. But strangely, she didn't hear the sound escape her lips, nor did she hear Nadir clash against Singularity again and again as Luna tried to reach her sister. She failed. Just as Titan did with Celestia, he moved through Luna's guard with perfect anticipation and shattered her face with a blow to the cheek. Luna beat her wings to throw herself away. Titan caught her forelegs with the other half of Singularity, buried himself in the ground beneath him. Then he swung through the air. Celestia watched it in horror. Luna hit the impaled Singularity, much the same way Celestia had been. She didn't get back up. Neither did Celestia. It had taken Titan seconds to turn their entire strategy against them, rendered them powerless. Is there fight left within you? Titan said. Celestia's heart seized around his unnatural blade. Do you have more light inside that must be quelled? Celestia gritted her teeth. They weren't going to let him win. She'd find a way. Look, Titan said simply, turning his face skyward. The storm above them began to part before his will, till a small window of sky could be seen. Look, he said again, not at the stairs, but at the cold, empty dark between them, around them, above them. We try so hard to fill it, but the truth has always been that it cannot be conquered. Turned his eyes forward, back to the Everfree and Citadel as center. It is done, he said. The world will be perfect again. The shaft of light broke through the sky and intensified, and then flashed, casting the world into a vivid contrast that was brighter than any lightning strike for the briefest of moments. Twilight! Celestia thought his old ponykind was damned. A ring expanded outward in the horizon from the citadel, casting a dull light over the landscape as it traveled outwards. It grew, moved outward, and grew more, until it became dim enough to appear the faintest shade of purple. No, Titan whispered. She was falling, flying almost, in a sea of light and the edge of light. Magic flowed over her, around her, through her, an electrifying spear of light that carried agony and power in equal measure. She wondered which one would drown her first, the blinding shock of pain or the violent surge of magic. This was not the magic of harmony. Magic she rose upon a wave and drew to a will. This was the magic of Titan, harsh and harmful and totally beyond taming. And stopping it was like trying to stand in a thunderbolt without end. Her fragile form cracked and broke within the torrent of energy. Her hair melted away as her host disintegrated into dust, to be carried past her and into fire into the sky. The night that she wrapped around her skin broke and faded. Flesh beneath began to churn and chief away. It was an effort just to stay in one place. So great was the force that brought her to scare into the heavens. The last few beats of her heart brought her to mind the precious seconds it needed to think. It was never her intention to stop Titan's spell. Nothing could stop power like this. She just needed to divert it, disrupt it. All that power had gone to the right places, like a child smashing a priceless work of art. She would just break a spell by pushing the power away from its course. She pushed away every kind of magic that she had, barriers made of thought cracked and shattered their instant conception. So great was the flow of magical might, it stripped enchantments from her armor, from her skin, and then bore the thoughts of her mind. Her horns shattered. 100 fragments disintegrated into 100 fragments before disappearing into the sky above. Thunder and lightning were called by her mind of steel, an effort that created not a shield, but a sword was to attack Titan's channel of magic. Energy arced off her body, it burned away in a sea of light as she tried to derail the spell. It churned around her, offset, but not otherwise hindered. Her eyes and ears bled away. The world of roaring azure white became only empty blackness. Her skin was as strong as stone, as steel, as the unbreakable wall of Master General. Before Titan's spell, it broke. Skin gave way to blood and muscle. Blood boiled and muscle burned and cracked. Fat melted and trailed up, away from her physical self, and her heart beat for one last time as Titan's spell went on. Without eyes, she saw them. 5 points of colored light in a world of only darkness. Verity, white, faded and dull as life left her. Applejack, orange, burning steady even as she watched her friends die. Rainbow Dash, blue, bright and faint, brightest of all. Fluttershy, yellow, soft and warm, almost inviting. Pinkie Pie, pink, twinkling mirthfully at the end of the world. Without ears, she heard a voice called Twilight Sparkle. She never could tell which one of them said it. She found strength. Magic, real magic, flowed over her and around her, through her. And Titan's spell was paltry by comparison. Without muscles, she reached out a hoof and split the beam. The light ran around her, and a way of water with stream runs around a stone. It seemed to her that the entire universe collapsed in her mind, and she knew that every inch of the citadel blazed with purple light with the light of her magic. She called, and it answered. 1,000,000 stars taking their proper positions as 5 orbs of light drifted closer in her mind. Then the spells melted in her mind, and Harmony's knowledge taking its place alongside that of Terra's, of Nihilus's, of Corsair's, spells to create life, spells to build cities, spells to heal, and not a single spell for war. Finally, she understood why she'd never been able to understand the elements of harmony. They were a puzzle, and she had been missing all the pieces. 5 orbs of light converged into darkness as Harmony's magic was made whole once again. The spell beneath her changed, becoming something that was no longer Titan's spell of dominance, but a new design made just for her. Without muscles, she thrust a hoof forward again. This time the stream of light did not split, but rather embraced her. It warmed her bare bones even as it broke them, making room for something greater. She floated alive, in a stream of energy and matter. Light wrapped itself around new bones. It became muscles and arteries, flesh remade, her form stretched, and a pinpoint of purple luminescence grew in her chest, and then took form and beat as a newborn heart. She threw her head back and opened new eyes to look skyward, as her skeletal structure shifted to accommodate wings. 100 fragments of bone converged 100 times. They converged into a horn that was long and graceful. Hooves tessellated to the end of her legs as the space between her wing bones became taut with muscled flesh. A ripple of skin traveled over her form and was followed by a coat of vivid purple. An immortal heart beat within her chest. She felt every drop of blood flowing through her veins, warm and crackling with magical might. Her ears pricked as she heard the crack of thunder from the storm over Canterlot. She turned, and her eyes regarded her friends, still standing in the highest ring of her citadel. Titan's blade storm disappeared as she folded into null space with barely a thought. Rarity, long since fallen, was in a case of field of crystal preserved. The rest of them looked at her, stared at her with awe. She smiled at them, and that all vanished, replaced with relief and hope and love. Pinkie Pie stood. "Good luck," she said. With that, she turned her defiant eyes skyward, knowing with satisfaction that the 6 stars of her citadel made an opening large enough for her to fit against the sky, and that it was shaped like a 6-pointed star. If any of you want to play Angel of Light for Dreamtale right about now, be my guest, or just sit back, relax, grab your favorite ass-whooping song and hit the sky! Woo! Titan whispered, "No." She heard him from a city away. The storm had brought itself to a halt against Mount Avalon, and with nowhere to go, was descending upon Canterlot. She watched her home city as it was engulfed by gale-force winds, black clouds that boiled with unspent power. She turned her eyes downward to where the rest of the gods were gathered outside the western gate. She chose her spot well, landing in exactly the same place Titan must have only moments before. As an amethyst, she blazed a comet's trail through the sky to strike the ground. The shattered stones and scattered dirt beneath her hooves healed as she landed, remaking a small section of the road to be as new and perfect as the day had been laid. Hundreds of pieces of star steel surrounded her, digging into the ground as they did. The metal was a strange combination of platinum, uranium, and tungsten. Without Harmony's magic, it wouldn't have been an effective alloy at all. With it, they glowed, etched with purple light, an incredibly dense material. Her mane and tail undulated in the air around her, coils of an infinite number of colors wrapping itself around one another, scattered with a million stars. They were nebulae, deep and vast as the empty dark itself, and their ethereal shape ran down her neck, along the edges to her wings. Her irises burned from within, as the same as the ever-changing light of the cosmos. To look at them was to see an entire galaxy hidden beneath a tiny ring of purple. She was exactly as tall as Titan, because he was exactly his age. And just below the crest of her shifting mane, a ring of light parting the infinite nebula, was the Empyrean crown of Harmony, Queen of the Gods. She willed the thunder to split the sky, and it did so, casting the entire world in brilliant purple contrast. She spoke, her voice a sip of the orchestra. Titan. 2 pinpoints of light shot forth and struck the blades that pinned Celestia and Luna to the ground. Titan drew them back to himself and took a step back. Harmony? She shook her head. No, Titan. I am not your wife. You killed her, remember? Nearby, fragments of star steel lifted themselves from the ground and were drawn from her body like iron to a magnet. Plates melted against her chest, belly, and legs, forming a seamless suit of silver armor arched with purple light. The Empyrean plate. The first suit of armor. All other armor was but a pale reflection of Harmony's war regalia. She took a step forward, and Titan tensed. I am the voice of every pony that has suffered in darkness, and I cry out for vengeance. I am a drop of equanimity in the sea of immortality. I am cold, cruel logic, tempered in the light of friendship, and I am unafraid. I am hope. I am freedom, and I am love. She cast Equinox for nothing at all. Then she cast Vorpal. 14 diamonds folding themselves out of space and glimmering with an inner purple light. I am Twilight Sparkle, she said, and I am the end of war! Titan, you dead. I mean, you just dead. I mean, you are dead. She sent the spell out to Celestia and Luna, and Celestia's voice sounded inside her mind, warm and weak.
Twilight? Celestia, are you okay? I'll be fine. I can help you fight.
Twilight looked down at Celestia's emancipated form. She was the princess, even in the right mind?
Don't worry, she thought. Everything's gonna be okay. Just go to sleep, Celestia. I'll wake you up in the morning. It was me, Twilight. I know, Celestia. Thank you. Remember, Twilight. This world is not to be won by war. Remember.
Celestia lost consciousness. Her conversation with Luna was more direct.
Luna?
Titan is extremely capable with his blade, Twilight Sparkle. You may not be his master in blade casting. He beat us by being predictable, by taking stock of both our styles, and defeating us in a matter of seconds. He telegraphs motions with his muscles and his legs, and he's very reserved when it comes to any use of magic. He thinks he is superior to everything, Twilight. He thinks it is his right to rule all. He blames ponykind for the death of Harmony, Terra, and both Empyreans. He is proud, full of hubris, but do not think him weak or unclever. He will kill you if given a chance. Right. I can't fight with you, Twilight. I'm sorry. Just remember that we fight with what we fight for. It took her the space of a second to have both her conversations. Thought was a very efficient form of communication. The princesses could do it well. Her declaration itself had barely left her lips. Titan regarded her, voiced an emotionless mask. Did he hide them well, or did he just not feel anything? You intend to fight me for control, he said. The words drew Twilight back to the present. Titan was observing the final protocol in the Immortal game. I do. Twilight noticed that the storm was almost upon them now. The turbulent winds were just beginning to descend upon the highest towers of Caroline Castle. As Celestia and Luna are both assets to us, I'd like to put forth Candlelit proper as a suitable occasion. Acceptable, Titan said without a single break of composure. We will begin with Avalon. A soft wave rippled over Twilight, and a crack sounded as Titan broke the sound barrier from a standstill. She never lost track of this moment as he sped away. Her eyes cast every bit of his equine speed with no trouble at all. She followed, parting the drag forces and exceeding the speed of which the ground just as easily as he had. Caroline was bored beneath her as she went. 1,000 glowing buildings of stone and glass, all connected by crisscrossing streets and bridgeways, over the outer city and into inner city, where the buildings were taller and more densely packed. They finally passed the green of palace grounds. She stood atop of the Tower of the Sun, gazing across the stretch of empty air to the Tower of the Moon, upon which Titan stood, mane flowing. You think yourself a god, Twilight Sparkle. Tusts of wind blew at her mane, and the maelstrom raged just above her. I am a god, Titan. By any definition, I am more of a god than you. What you are is a perversion, an abomination. Mount Avalon was barely visible behind Titan through the obscuring cover of clouds. The wind was building, and the shingles beneath Twilight's hooves were rattled on that rooftop. It is you who is a perversion, Titan. Every second you've been in my world has changed it for the worse. But now those seconds are running out. I'm going to erase everything you ever accomplished, Titan, and your defeat will invalidate your very presence. How pathetic, Titan said. I validate existence itself. My very purpose is to be the one true king. You are but a speck. The storm hit, and Twilight decided he talked too much. She teleported, landing directly in front of him, to him with a simple burst of telekinetic force, just to start things off simple. Apparently she surprised him, because her spell struck him in the chest. Titan was thrown backwards with enough force to topple a building, back and back until he landed with all four legs against the steep face of Mount Avalon. Cracks appeared around his hooves. Twilight raced to halt and examined it in front of her face. To break solid stone with the barest of thoughts. To command a storm with a wave of a hoof. To ruin cities with her passage. She was an alicorn. She chased Titan, drawing the air around her body before sliding it towards the king. Titan thrust 2 halves of singularity towards the face of Mount Avalon. His horn blazed. A tremendous series of cracks threatened to break Twilight's eardrums as he pulled his blade free and took out the side of the mountain and further into the storm. Twilight reached the edge of Mount Avalon to find that it had been shattered. Great sharks of rock, bigger than the largest houses of Caroline, began to partlessly fall away from the mountain, their jagged edges grinding against one another with a titanic noise. She looked up just as another stretch of lightning illuminated the sky. And there, just a small silhouette in the storm, was Titan. The lightning arced up and down, and Twilight caught it on an equinox, causing it to bounce away and score a nearby mountain shard with a line of molten rock. Twilight spit Vorpal, and charged each blade casted shard with kinetic energy, wrapped them around a blanket of friction-reducing magic. 14 diamonds blazed with reflecting violet light, and sped the air towards the king. A missile came toward her. Twilight slipped into the crack between 2 falling stones, and decimated the rock beneath her. As she looked up at the inside, a falling dozen stars were shown. Titan looked up at the apex of the falling rocks, and hurled a set of dark shackles at Twilight, a binding. Twilight didn't want to think of what could do to her if he got her to stop moving. Her horn flashed, and Twilight reversed gravity for only herself, turning the entire world upside down. Now she looked down at the king. Twilight planted her hooves on the nearest rock. It was now falling upward towards the ground, and began to run. Vorpal returned to her, having missed its target, but the diamonds cut Titan's binding to ribbons as he rose to meet her. She loosened another spell at Titan, this one a ball of light that would sap his Pegasus magic. They fell toward one another through the massive stones as they shaked off the mountain, hurling and dodging spells as they went. Twilight never had Equinox or Vorpal on herself at the same time. Rarely did she even have either. Spells whistled and cracked between them. The mountain shankers of Mount Avalon broke and shattered in a way to crash against the ground below. As the distance closed between them, the time they had to react to each other's attacks lessened. The barrage of spells became frantic. Light danced and flashed between them as they planted their hooves on the neighboring shards. Closer and closer they came as the stones were forced together, the space between them dwindling. Equinox and Vorpal met twin halves of singularity, and a torrent of energy coursed through Twilight and sizzled in the air around her. Brilliant white sparks cascaded from the blades to ricochet off the ground around them. Twilight pulled her blades back to a combat position. They had less of a second next to one another in the avalanche. The persisting was less than ideal, as they were both looking down at one another. But the series of blows they exchanged in that small time frame was unlike anything Twilight had ever experienced. He almost killed her as she drew Forple Black, preparing to jab. Singularity darted forward, just beyond the reach of Equinox, and slashed at Twilight's neck, intending to decapitate her. She drew back as fast as she could, and his blade merely severed her collarbone, several arteries, and her throat on its way out. Blood spilled into the air in tiny droplets. Twilight's Alicorn senses picked up on every one of them. They twisted over one another, and simultaneously blasted each other with telekinetic force as an opening presented itself. Twilight was sent backwards, down, and toward the sky as Titan was thrown to the ground. Twilight landed with her feet against the falling rock. Her first gravity for herself again, started throwing spells. Equinox went first. Charged with explosive might, Forple followed it. Each shard wrapped around a spell designed to unravel the protective enchantments. She threw a modified version of the Titan spell out, and there's her bolt of lightning. Each of them disappeared into the same cloud of shattered rocket dust at the base of the mountain. Twilight felt Titan's magic at work as he deflected the attacks with blades and barriers. No heart, she said. She let loose a half-second burst from a god-slaying spell, now armed with the tungsten uranium-iron mixture of Titan's own blade storm. A beam of blue light sheared downward, then stream of super dense metal, blowing a hole into the king's chest, cauterizing her wound. Against Twilight's spell there could be no defense. Twilight dove downward, teleporting just as he went supersonic to smash against the ground before the king. Equinox and Forple testily into form at her sides as Titan rounded her. Heedless of the hole burning through his skull back to his belly. Twilight looked at the king, her face at her expressionless mask. No soul. Twilight tapped Rarity, and her mind was filled with a cool dedication to form and skill. The blades before her practically moved of their own accord, responding to small ticks that Twilight herself picked up in the muscles of Titan's legs. Their hosts danced over uneven ground, weapons clashed in the air before them. Twilight came to Titan, like Rarity came at a particularly difficult convolutions of fabrics, working her blades from every angle, threading them through singularity as Titan struggled to adapt his painfully simple style. Had he met his match before? Titan apparently never had any reason to learn to fight, being so much stronger than everyone else alive. And now he faced Twilight, who wielded the power to destroy anything and everything. Nothing would ever hurt her or her friends ever again. The storm was in full swing, buffeting the winds to topple any mortal pony, shards of broken windows, scattered fragments of rock, wooden splinters, and roof shingles bounced harmfully off their bodies or disintegrated coming in contact with their bodies. Twilight kept the initiative, breaking Titan's assault, pressing to his guard. Caroline Castle stretched out behind Titan. Twilight saw her chance. She spoke 2 words as she broke Titan's defenses. No hope. Twilight surged forward as her blades pushed into the dirt, drawing a hoof off the ground as their weapons were momentarily taken out of play. It was grim satisfaction as he saw Titan wouldn't be able to block her strike in time. After all, he could only move as fast as she could. Twilight tapped Applejack and Rainbow Dash as she coated her hoof in telekinetic energy and slammed it into Titan's face. Forward and out from her chest to maximize power, her punch landed. Her hoof cracked. Every bone in her foreleg shattered, becoming like so many pebbles stuffed into a sack of skin. The plates of metal encasing her leg broke away and were thrown in every direction, bouncing off her skin and face. It was nothing compared to what had Titan. His skull became dust where her hoof struck, broke into fragments everywhere else. His eyes were squeezed halfway out their sockets, and his muzzle compressed like an accordion as teeth were pushed out through the back of his throat. His neck snapped and his head went sailing backward, and his body followed too slowly. It still followed. A Titan was thrown into the walls of Canterlot Castle like a missile. Twilight watched as he broke through the walls to the library and decimated a dozen bookshelves to come on the other side with cool indifference. No blood. Not a Titan. What kind of monster was he? She teleported to the courtyard as he skidded to a halt on the ground, raising her blades for the kill. There was rain now, water falling to the sky as the storm fell apart. It made no difference to Twilight's senses. It just made the light from their spells dabble against the wet ground. Her blades descended as Titan came to a halt at her hooves, perfectly timed to shear off his head. Titan wasn't going to give her victory so easy. He blitzed, using a steam spell to bring herself off the ground behind Twilight. She sensed the raising both halves of singularity while her back was turned. Nearby, the library began to collapse. Twilight teleported behind Titan, and struggled with a blast of telekinesis, sending him flying through the mess all nearby. He teleported to his side, was skidding against the stone floor. Singularity came at her, and Twilight instinctively blocked it with Equinox. It was only her blade that died out as she realized her error. Titan had came at her with a whole singularity, and half her power was funneled into Equinox. Was it enough to stop it? The tip of Titan's blade buried herself into her chest. His horn flashed as he released another bout of war magic. Her chest exploded, bursting outward like a shallow pool struck by stone. She moved back, propelled by her own wings, and half by the force of Titan's blow. He went straight into the air to meet her combat once again. Twilight teleported behind him, and sent it flying into an orrery with another modified missile. She held herself into the air as her turret flew back into itself, firing another burst of her god-sending spell, this one longer than the previous one had been. Titan dodged it, but still steered out of the battle in the moon in the armory. They fought on, blitzing and teleporting as they threw spells at another from a distance. Their classes were short and brutal. Their war spells rarely struck home. They ignored the rain, ignored the wind. They ignored Canterlot Castle. Twilight understood why Titan never came to Castle as a seat of power. Why would he or she care about pony-made structure? They broke through walls of stone like they were mist, toppled towers with what to them were like a puff of air. Seconds were hardly an effective way to measure time at the speed they fought. Canterlot Castle was destroyed, to a building, in less than 20 of Twilight's heartbeats. All but the Tower of the Sun. Twilight teleported back to the ground, and Titan stood away from her. What is it, Twilight Sparkle, that your heart truly desires? How would you build a perfect world? Am I supposed to pretend that act as though I have these defects that you have ponykind worship in my place? My nature is perfect. I cannot feel your falls. No, Twilight said. I don't want you to find redemption, Titan. I want... First, several things happened at once. First, Twilight stopped tempting Titan with her magic. A 3,000-year alicorn, sheathed in conjured armor and blade cast, simply vanished from her senses. She couldn't rely on sight and sound to track Titan. The storm had scared her vision and traveled too slowly. Titan fired another magic missile at her, but it was fast. Too fast for Twilight to dodge, almost fast as her god-slaying spell. As he did so, he blitzed once more. Twilight teleported just as the spell struck her, throwing herself through space to land somewhere, anywhere away from the king. She landed in Celestia's study in the Tower of Sun, as Titan's spell tore away from her shoulder and one of her forelegs, scattering pieces of armor and forcing some of them into her abdomen. Most of it missed her, however, as Twilight was pushed back into the Canterlot air. Most of the study went with her. The tower began to fall, ponderously slow, as Titan met her in the air. Both caught their blades and punched her in the chest. She went up and back, tearing away another section of the tower with her passage. Titan met her again and again, until all that fell to the ground below was just dust and rubble. Canterlot Castle was no more. Titan met her again, and this time Twilight was ready. She reached out and sensed everything. Every bit of air, water, and dust and debris around them, they constructed a second spell to find a part of the hole that was empty. A simple inversion spell that added to the hole gave her an accurate means of detection. Titan came at her. Most of the surprise was he spun to be his blades in midair. If he was, it didn't show on his face. They went up and up, carried by alicorn wings into the heart of the storm. Winds growing ever stronger. The pace they set was slow. Their flight was steady. It made her easier to reach and fight each other with her blades on the way up. Twilight tapped rarity, but it wasn't enough. Her blade work began to fail her. Titan's style completely transformed. It was direct, still focused and overt, but he was better now. He met jabs and slashes with ease. His blade took away chunks of her flesh with almost impunity. Every motion of his blades put on her defensive, forced her to compromise more and more of her guard. His presence never changed. He held nothing save the barest hint of contempt. He wore it when he was winning, just as he did when he was losing. Twilight didn't understand how he was suddenly beating her. No pony could learn that fast. She couldn't learn that fast. Could Titan? He broke into her guard, dipped singularity into her chest, and blew it apart once more. Twilight pulled the clouds beneath her with her Pegasus magic as she flew, sliding to a hole in the soft surface and readying herself for Titan's next attack. It never came. I am the only absolute in all of creation. Titan says he ascended lightly into the cloud, to turn hot 20 meters away. You are but a fragment of my greatest dream. It is a dream that has become a nightmare. His eyes burned, 2 rings of light boring through her into the darkness. I cannot lose Twilight Sparkle. Twilight burned her hooves, gritting her teeth. One of them shattered, then healed. We'll see, she said, narrowing her eyes. She prepared to lunge. Her light stayed resident as she looked into the Titan's eyes, ignoring her commands to move. His eyes were like tunnels of light, drawing her in, absorbing her. Titan was using the stare. Immediately, Twilight tapped Fluttershy and forced herself to keep Titan's gaze. He wanted a battle of wills, she'd give him one. She conjured up bits and scraps of experience she had with her friends. Albrecht's sign she started to haul her cart. Fluttershy laying out to feed the animals. Verity pressing fabric to her board with a hiss of steam and iron. All those things were swallowed in an instant by an empty dark, devoured by a vast blackness that Twilight couldn't begin to imagine. It encompassed her, drawing her the unrelenting will of a mind that killed stars and created worlds, and now turned its sights in the irreversible erasing of everything that made her species special. Twilight tried to conjure up another image. Spike sucking on a claw but faltered. She was being crazed by the weight of her own significance in Titan's harsh, burning eyes. There was nothing she could do about it. His will wasn't something that could be fought. Titan broke the stare and charged. She raised Vorpal to prevent Singularity from tearing her head from his shoulders. But nothing stopped the other half from stabbing her through the heart. She couldn't think. She could hardly feel after being beaten down by Titan's indomitable will. What if he had kept her there longer? There was a sound like a colossal growl. Twilight was thrown back hundreds of meters. It brought her senses. She skated to a halt, searching for Titan. He appeared behind her. I see what you fight for, Twilight Sparkle. You fight for the world you once held, the world you now rule.
No,
Twilight said, backing away from him. Was he supposed to want to rule the world? That was what gods did, didn't it? Titan raised his blade high, and the clouds parted around them in the space of a second. Look, Twilight Sparkle, this is your world. Lightning danced across the sky, illuminating the landscape before them in a series of cracks and booms. The Everfree first, swaths of it burning, her citadel tall and imposing. Ponyville, half of it a broken ruin, and Caroline beneath them. The palace that had stood for a millennia, destroyed in a heartbeat with hardly a second thought. Your fragile minds are weak and broken with the horrors that resistance has brought. Your homes are gone, and the ones you love have died by the hundreds. Do you ever think you can regain the world you fight for, Twilight Sparkle? Titan looked at Titan, standing against the stars in his armor. Could she ever go back to the way things were? The answer was no. So plain and simple to see it hurt her all the more. She thought of the palace, the pile of rubble and glass beneath them. She held the brake on it, tearing the whole thing apart in a space of heartbeats. When did she become so careless and violent? When she took up the power of harmony. How could Twilight see anything as valuable, now that Ponykind's castles might as well have been made of dying sand on the beach? Mountains were as breakable and unfried clay. Physical laws were mutable things. Their cities made of paper. Monuments were only a sleepable huff away from utter destruction. A realization struck Twilight. This was how Titan felt all the time. He moved through a world that he created, and no matter where he stood, he could destroy everything and anything he saw, and everything he could destroy he could replace. And there were ponies, too, a race he created, but each of them was barely more than a collection of proteins and fats, a weak reflection of his own magical might. They died in so short of a time, all of them, that as individuals they hardly mattered, but as a race they were resilient and whole. Killing a pony was like putting a scratch on his own creation. It would heal, but it wouldn't learn. Every 100 years the race would die and replace itself, and so Ponykind was perpetually young, always destined to repeat the mistakes of its predecessors, and always so fragile, such small things compared to mountains and cities, and so meaningless thinking as individuals. They convinced Harmony otherwise, though, and in doing so they sealed the fate of his son and killed his wife. Real beings, immortal beings, true companions in a world made of entirely changing mist, a world that he lived in for thousands of years. How could he not act the way he did now? Twilight swallowed as he took in the king in his immaculate armor. No, not immaculate. Just by his flank a piece was missing. A fragment that he failed to replace with whatever spell summoned the suit. Laid bare before Twilight was his key mark. A simple white circle. What we fight for, Luna said. This world is not to be won by war, Celestia said. Yes. Titan gave the slightest tilt of his head. What did you say? Twilight nodded to herself and looked back at the king. I said yes. I can fix this world. My kind can make it good again. Titan regarded for a moment. You are wrong. We can never get back what is lost, Twilight Sparkle. Why are you king? Twilight asked. Are you trying to delay me, Twilight Sparkle? Are you waiting for my daughters to regain some measure of power and come to your aid? They won't. Singularity does not cause wounds that heal easily. Why are you king? She asked again. You are fast becoming uninteresting, Twilight Sparkle. Why are you king, Titan? So be it. Titan lunged, air drawing around his form in a blanket of pressure as he spread his dark wings. Singularity cut the air at his sides. Blaze once again took on his natural, contemptuous mask. Twilight blocked his blaze and caught his momentum with her forelegs, but didn't fight back. She didn't fight back as he brought Singularity for another hail of blows, or as a lightning bolt as thick as a tree trunk smote her from the sky. She steadied herself in the air, threw up a shield when he cast another war spell at her, but didn't throw anything back at him. Her shield stayed the force of the blow, but was still thrown to the ground below. She landed in the middle of the street in the industrial district. Titan came at her not 2 heartbeats later. She teleported to meet them. Blades met blades, and the light sparks lit the air around them as Twilight held Titan busy. What are you doing? He said as the light of Equinox played across his face. Fight me. Twilight pushed against Singularity's halves. Why are you king? Titan forced so much magic to his weapon, both their blades went out. A step forward, thrust a hoof at Twilight's face. She caught it, and the one that followed it, with her forelegs straining to keep them at bay. Fight me! Tell me why you're king, Titan. What gives you the right to rule? He slammed his head forward. Twilight's muzzle broke like a glass of wire under a hammer, bones shattering and fangs liquefying. She staggered back as Titan brought his hind legs around, but managed to block the strike before it could land. She didn't retaliate. Titan came at her, a whirlwind of focused hooves. The force of which meant it was incredible, but Twilight could match his blow. Bones shattered as their legs met, healed again in an instant. The road beneath them, cracked by the force, planted their legs, and all the while Twilight didn't fight back. The end came when Titan managed to trip her, sending her sprawling to the ground. Hoof met her chest before she could recover. Twilight was thrown to a solid stone wall, and into a room what looked like to be a workshop of some kind. Titan blitzed to her side, wrapped a foreleg under her horn, and then drove her to the back of her head. There was an audible snap as her horn shattered, and her hooves drove down to wrap themselves around Twilight's neck as he placed his muzzle beside her ear. Fight me, Twilight Sparkle. Do not lose hope. Do not give in to despair. The grip on her neck tightened, and Twilight struggled to break free. Her forelegs beat against the ground, tearing holes out of the stone floor, but he didn't move. It made no sense. Both of them together weighed almost nothing compared to Twilight's strength. She should have been able to send him into the sky from here. The muscles in her neck screamed in protest. Pressed on all sides, she felt her spine fracture and snap. Fight me, Twilight Sparkle, with every ounce of strength you have in you. Spill every drop of blood you have trying to fight me. Blood thundered in her ears. It pulled in her neck and twisted it back. Titan was trying to tear her hair off. I will have you die knowing that everything you had was not enough. That with all your allies and gambits and the stolen power of Harmony herself, you could not defeat me. Because I am Almighty Twilight Sparkle. I am the soul of existence itself, and I rule all. Twilight took down a single word. Why? One by one her vertebrae began to snap, and her vocal cords went with them. She wondered if that would be the last words he ever spoke. Why? It was my purpose, Titan whispered. My birthright. Twilight buried her forelegs in the stone beneath her and heaved, throwing Titan forward, hooves still gripping her neck. She rolled him onto his back, belly in the air. Then she slammed her forelegs into his shoulders, causing his grip to loosen. With a flash of and surge of earth-pulling magic, horn and neck healed. She teleported to a less compromising position, bringing herself to stand over the king. You think you rule by defying light? Twilight said.
You think that you, of all ponies, should have the power to choose what is right and wrong? But no pony ever gave you that power, Titan. I gave myself the power, he said, his horn blazed. Another missile, moving impulsively fast. This time Twilight didn't have the space to avoid it. It took her full in the chest. It wasn't painful at all. That surprised Twilight. It was more like the missile she had defended as Immortal. She only had the faintest recollection of losing her abdominal cavity, on the flesh slugging off her legs and face, body becoming more compacted and totally in incline. Barely through building after building before rolling limply to a stop in the courtyard of Candlelight Castle. Her bones snapping and seizing back into place, and her skin regrowing back with a ripple of singling magic. No sooner had she landed than singularity impaled her through her newly healed heart, as Titan descended directly and stand beside her. The world collapsed in around his blade, pulling Twilight toward it from all directions. She felt her magic ebb. It was now or ever. You gave yourself that power, she said. Titan's eyes narrowed. Be silent and die, mortal. No. Twilight gasped. A thin trickle of blood ran out of her mouth. You see what I see, Titan. You gave yourself the power to do as you wish, but you never had the power to grant such a privilege. I am the one true king, Titan said. I have the power to... Twilight coughed. You're a god because you're a god because you're a god, she said. You let your mind fall into the same grooves you carved for yourself over a millennia of thought. It's a circular argument, and one you've used to justify the slaughter of numerous innocents, all of them no less endowed with a mind and soul than you. Lies! Titan shouted. Eyes were wild. Titan's immortal heart seized around his blade, each beat weaker than the last, blood flowing from the wound. Terra betrayed you when she took out the sliver. Harmony left me this power to kill you with. Ponykind has never accepted your rule. Even Exhaustus, the greatest of your monsters, saw what we see. But you don't. Every single in this world stands against you, Titan. So much that you had to take our souls to validate your rule. No, Titan said. You turned them against me. You poisoned them! Twilight shook her head. You're alone, Titan. You're trying to rule a world that prospered without you for 1,000 years. It's not us. It's you. You're the flaw in the system. You're what's wrong. An ugly splotch of erratic perfection on a beautiful canvas of organized chaos. And you spend every waking moment measuring your own insignificance against ours. Convincing yourself that it isn't true, don't you? Titan froze, mane and tail drifting, his eyes two uncertain circles of light. His mouth open, as if he were going to say something, but no words came. His brow furrowed. He looked at Twilight to ask her why. Singularity went out. Twilight was liquid, flowing into her hooves, and so even as Equinox and Forple folded themselves out of space and fused into an incandescent shaft of violet light. She held it aloft, drawing every ounce of Pegasus magic she could muster, and the shaft was really lightning, arced down from the center of the storm to strike the Empyrean blade and fill it with a power to kill a god. Then she tapped Pinkie Pie, drawing on the power of an arc pony to intercept Titan even as he tried to escape. She beat his forelegs away with her own, seeing exactly how he was going to move before the thoughts even crossed his mind. The Empyrean blade forced its way to the center of his chest, right where his heart would be if he had one. Titan didn't scream. Twilight caught his eyes, tapped Fluttershy and used to stare. This time she met a broken ego, still struggling to put itself back together again. Titan's mind was still vast and powerful, however, and his will pushed against hers, an inexorable wave of strength. Twilight gave him everything she knew of Luna and Celestia. The way Luna was headstrong and antisocial, the way Celestia was subtle in their influence, and the way both of them cared for Equestria, the way they were each inspiring in their own way, the way they had won the love of ponykind in a way Titan never could. His fractured willpower never stood a chance. He stood, locked in Twilight's grasp, and crushed under her will as her blade burned away his magical defenses, till at long last they broke. Twilight grabbed the King of Gods with her mind and held him in her absolute power. She took all of his magic, all of it, stripping it away and adding it to her own, pulling her blade free and letting him heal the wound so he wouldn't die. Didn't take her long at all. While she did so, she reached out and broke up the remaining bits of the storm, and almost completely burnt itself out on Canterlot. So it was a simple matter for Twilight to disperse the clouds that remained, sending him away to reign over the rest of Equestria. When she released Titan, the world was whole again.
He fell to his knees, a stallion as big and broad as Twilight had ever seen, but still pitifully small compared to a god. His mane hung limply around his head, and he trembled, surrounded by the feathers that had fallen out of his wings as he disappeared, and fragments of what must have been a horn. He looked at Twilight with wide eyes that were dull, save for the reflected light of her blade. "Gods can die," Twilight said, "but you can live. Live as a mortal, if you so choose. You took the first step in seeing the error of your ways today. It might take the course of an entire lifetime, but we'll make you see that you were wrong. You'll change, Titan. Then you'll have to live with the guilt of what you've done forever." Terra was brave enough to make that choice, even if he doesn't realize it yet. Titan's legs continued to shake. Twilight wasn't surprised. He got his whole life feeling almost weightless. Now he had to stand as a mortal. One of the things that was proving difficult, perhaps harder for him than anything he had ever done before. Still he managed it, bringing himself up to his full height and regarded her, face still devoid of any expression. Twilight never knew if he decided he would die fighting, or simply didn't understand that a mortal couldn't help to harm her. Regardless, Titan jumped at her, so slow and frail, face contorting with rage. She was a god, and it was her duty to mete out judgment and wield the power of life over death. Her blade traveled through his neck as easily over the air, and Titan, king of the world and final foe of ponykind, died. Twilight sighed as he found herself alone in the ruins of Canterlot Castle. It was her duty, her responsibility, not her privilege. The journey back to Ponyville was a short one. Twilight made sure Celestia and Luna were fine before leaving Canterlot. They were unconscious, but all right, just as he thought they would be. Ponykind still had his princesses, and Twilight still had her mentor. It was dark out when she reached the town, but still thriving with activity. The army returned there after they entered the citadel. Must have seen the duel of Canterlot from afar. It had only been a matter of minutes since the fighting had stopped. What had those minutes felt like? Did the ponies waiting to see if tonight was their doom or salvation? She chose her place of landing to be the empty pedestal in the town square. She shot towards it in a streak of violet light, deliberately drawing as much attention as she could. When she landed, all eyes turned to her, and the entire town was plunged into silence. Twilight looked around at the terrified faces of ponykind, watching as terror turned to recognition. Yes, she was still Twilight Sparkle, Master General. Standing there before them, that could only mean victory! Twilight shouted, her eloquent voice rolling over the town. The king is dead! From the depths of her null space, she produced his severed hair to hold it aloft before the crowd. The idea disgusted her, or at least part of her, but ponykind deserved this. They cheered. The war was over, and they won. I paid my dues, time after time. I've done my sentence, but committed no crime. And bad mistakes, I've made a few. I've heard my share of sand kicked in my face, but I've come through. We go on and on and on. Everybody, we are the champions, my friends. And we'll keep on fighting till the end. None of them were in any danger anymore. The idea was numbing and at the same time exhilarating. Life would go on. And they bowed. No salutes anymore. All of them supplicating themselves before Twilight Sparkle, the end of war. She stepped down from her pedestal. In the crowd parted her way, she made her way to Secret Cube Corner. It wasn't over. Not yet. Terra was just where Twilight left her. She shook as Twilight strode into the room, tossed Titan's hair to the floor just outside her bars. Her eyes sat between Twilight and the head, wide with awe and terror. For a time, Twilight was quiet. Terra said at last, her voice quivering, is he dead? Twilight looked down at Titan's head, stupefied, then back at Terra. Yes, Terra, he's gone. Forever. Terra swallowed. My father is invincible, she said, her voice strained. This can't. Twilight laid down and looked at Terra in the eyes. Titan is dead, Terra, which means from here on, there's no pony but you who can lay the blame for your actions. Do you understand? You're coming with me, Twilight said. I need a blueprint. At this, Terra seemed to regain some focus. A blueprint for what? She asked. They stepped out of Twilight's teleport and into her citadel. Twilight was straight. Her eyes forward as she stood atop the metal shards that received her. Looked at the tools she would need to save Rarity. Purple light still filled the etchings, and 1,000 shards floated beneath her in lazy orbits. Before her stood 5 friends. Behind her stood Terra. Twilight wished she could see the look on Terra's face after coming home at last, but she was too busy looking at her friends. "Sorry I left you waiting," Twilight said, as she strolled across the bridge that assembled before her and onto the inner ring. "Titan is dead." They each gave the same sigh that the army had, and that Twilight had also, so a great will had been lifted from her shoulders. "Celestia is alive," Twilight said, striding up to the crystal formation that held her dying friend. "Luna is alive." "Rarely?" Applejack choked out. "Her heart has stopped," Twilight said. "The blood doesn't flow anymore. Titan's magic has broken it entirely. It's eaten her skin, muscles, fat, and bone. That's all we really are. That and magic. There's still magic in her, Applejack. So there's still life. It's faint and frail. But she only sees a little flesh and a little bone." Twilight saw a look at Terra and gave a faint smile. "And a beautiful heart." She closed her eyes, slowly drawing the air through her nostrils. "There's only one heart that'll be guaranteed to fit, because there's only one heart that is perfect. It's already been shrunken down to size, and I have the original design. Both of them together should give me enough to make a perfect replica." "Harmony," Terra whispered. "She left it to you. The power of life." Twilight held her hoof to her side in answer. Every star in the citadel slipped in place to form a complex array of spiraling rings. Nihilus was with her. It takes surprisingly a little amount of power. The crystal encasing Verity broke, thin cracks spreading along its leaves until the shards broke away, disintegrating in the air. Twilight levitated her out of the citadel. The first step was a series of enchantments to keep her steady, to pump her blood, press her legs, to hold her together and keep her alive. They were beautiful things, incredibly complex, that performed the function of the living tissue itself. Harmony must have spent decades, or even centuries, trying to understand what made a living being tick. Everything inside it was so tiny and complex. A ripple of Twilight's power was thrown through the citadel. Twilight stripped away Titan's magic. Just like her enchantments, she only had to do a tenth of the thought process behind the spells. The citadel was an array of a million possible spells, and knew what to do, focusing her magic on the minutiae that she directed it. Then she began to knit the flesh anew, pulling raw materials from her own body, reforging them into the tissue that Rarity was missing. It was a slow process, but Twilight's Earth Pony magic killed her instantaneously. Rarity's flesh regrew as she was an Earth Pony herself. Twilight let out a breath she hadn't even known she was holding. It was possible. It was beautiful. It was a miracle. It was magic. To breathe life into a pony on the verge of death. What could possibly be more noble use of her gifts? She had saved lives by killing, but now the deed was pure and untainted. She worked until there was only one thing left to do. The shards of the citadel spinning and configuring around her to suit her needs. A ghost image appeared above Rarity. The same image Harmony had shown Terra in the memory from another lifetime. A beautiful heart. Faithfulness. 6 stars floated to form a ring in front of Terra. The fallen queen drew her vision away from the phantom heart. "Terra," Twilight said, "put your hoof in the ring, and I'll have all I need. Rarity will live again. Her life is in your hooves." Terra scoffed. "Hardly. You could force me." "I could. And if I don't, you'll kill me." "I might." "Terra," Fluttershy said, "don't be afraid and try to be the pony you were before. You want to survive, but you can live instead. That's what ponies do." "This doesn't mean anything," Terra said. "I don't have a choice. I'm not giving anything up to save your friend." Twilight gave a little tilt of her head. "Maybe you see it that way." "Baby steps, Terra." Terra shrugged and put her hoof to the ring before her. Twilight immediately set to work on Rarity's new heart. She had to teleport each piece back into place, removing the remnants of the old one as she did so. And while she reveled in the deed she was performing, a heart transplant. This was what magic was for, not killing in war! On a whim, she told the citadel open and raised the sun. Morning came to a cloudless sky, and the brilliant light of dawn floated through the silvery arms of winding beams. Twilight smiled as she finished her work, and a pulse of light finished her spells. Rarity's heart began to beat, and she opened her eyes. Flesh perfect form. Twilight teleported to stand beside them.
I'm alive?
Rarity asked. Twilight is an alicorn! She looked around, gaze traveling from pony to pony, searching for the answers.
How did the tail get here? Wait, did we win?
Elmsec moved to stand next to Rarity and watched the rising sun. Hush now, Sugar Cube. Watch the sun wrestle with us.
Come on, Tara. It's just a sunrise.
You're right, Twilight said.
It's just a sunrise. But I think that I, for one, could use a little more sun.
I've taken my bows, and my curtain calls. You've brought me fame and fortune and everything that goes with it. I thank you all. But it's been no bed of roses, no pleasure cruise. I considered it a challenge before the whole equine race that they were going to lose. We go on and on and on and on. They are the champions, my friends. And we'll keep on fighting till the end. We'll go on and on. We are the champions. We are the champions. No time for losers, 'cause we are the champions of the world. Trex,
Yes?
do we really have to read the epilogue? I mean, I've read the epilogue twice before. It doesn't add anything to the story, and we've got a perfect ending with Twilight just saying, I want to see the sunrise.
Well, despite the fact that the epilogue is the weakest part, we should do it anyway.
You're right. Everyone, see you next week.